Many statistics, over many years, have confirmed that diving is safe. Much safer than many others activities that we practice, without even thinking and realizing how risky they can be. We may have a 30-year-long diving career, with thousands of dives done, and all of them without even a single problem. But accidents happen, and accidents may happen, even to us. And the more we dive, the more we expose ourselves to the inherent risks of diving, which are out of our control. On the other hand, the less we dive, the more we are exposed to the risk related to the diver's behavior and ability, which could be not enough developed yet.
The nature itself of scuba diving requires some considerations that are not necessary for many other activities we could play. And long-term consequences of an accident may strongly depend on the taken actions in the few minutes after the accident happens. And they may require medical specialists and special medical equipment, as well as emergency logistic facilities, which are not everywhere available. Sometimes, public organizations rely on private ones to carry out the emergency services. Sometimes, public services are available, but they are not as good as private ones. And public services are not always free of charge, and a huge amount of money may need to be paid in advance to activate these services. Diving may take us to visit different countries, with different legislation, and different emergency organizations. A diving accident can be both expensive, as well as a difficult mental puzzle to be solved. An action plan is necessary much before the dive takes place, and it must consider the necessary steps to solve the situation, as well as make sure to have the resources to put into practice these steps. Divers are responsible for some of these steps, while the majority of them run behind the scene, and without letting the diver be able to do, or decide, a lot. These steps are already preset by the system.
But do divers need to have an extra insurance? Insurance might not represent just a good economical choice. It can be also the leverage, able to activate the steps behind the scenes, just mentioned. But on the other hand, when divers might not need to have one. First of all, if we dive only within our resident country, and if we know our country provides good emergency services, for a cheap cost, or even for free, then we may not need an insurance. Second, we might not need insurance if there is an agreement between the emergency services of our resident country and the emergency services of the country where we plan to dive. This is, for example, the case of many European divers when diving within the European Union. There are special agreements between some countries that allow European travelers to take advantage of the emergency and health services of the visited nation. These agreements are not the norm and may vary between nations, as well as they may need to be activated before entry into the country of destination. And of course, even costs and services need to be checked, because they may vary a lot from our country. And then, insurance may be not necessary if we already have another insurance that covers also scuba diving related issues. These insurances may vary a lot, are not intended especially for divers, and a check of what they cover is definitively necessary. If our case falls into one of these three categories, we might decide that we do not need insurance specifically for scuba diving. But we have to be aware that we might be missing something.
For those who decide that it's time to have insurance specifically thought for divers, price is one of the first evaluated indicators. If insurances were free of charge, then everybody would have one for any possible scenario. But they are not free, and for this reason, they are often disregarded. Where available, a time-based insurance can be a good solution. In this case, instead to have insurance with an annual duration, we may have one limited to the time of our diving holiday. The fee calculated daily will be probably higher compared to the same one, but calculated on a year-long agreement. And to make an oriented decision, we should consider how many dives we will do yearly, as well as how these dives are split along the year. When cost is the main indicator considered in purchasing an insurance, we have to make sure that we are not losing important features, which we may need in future. For if cost is important, but cheap insurance that does not offer us good services, is useless. Because the devil is in the details.
As usual, when we need insurance, a comparison between some of them is a good idea. This step is necessary to become aware of what services we may expect for the money we spend. To help you in this analysis, it may be helpful to think that when a diving accident happens, we may potentially have to face two different phases. The first is the emergency one, which we could summarize like take the diver from the water to the emergency facility, which will stabilize the diver's health condition, if possible. By simplifying, this may include the search and rescue service and the hyperbaric chamber treatment, both quite expensive and also both quite specific. Especially in the healthcare sector, knowledge and experience can vary greatly between facilities and professionals who often deal with divers, and those who deal with these scenarios only occasionally. And doctors working in a large international hospital may have less experience than their colleagues working in a small hyperbaric chamber, but dealing daily with divers. And then, if necessary, the second phase, which includes the coming healthcare till the full recovery, or to be allowed at least to move back home. This can require hours, days, weeks, or even months, and depending on the situation, this care can be received in a hospital, private home, or even resorts and hotels, if diver was on holiday. And never to forget that in some cases, the consequences of a diving accident can extend for the rest of the diver's life.
Regardless of which one we choose, we should always make sure to consider at least the following points. 24/7 contact service. Diving can take us to countries at different time zone, and often during holiday seasons. And even when diving locally, it's quite common to dive during public vacation. Being able to always and easily contact the emergency service of the insurance company can simplify a lot the management of an accident. Do we have to pay money in advance to get the emergency services, and then we will be refunded? Or the insurance company will directly activate and pay for the services we need? In which countries is the insurance policy working? Which depth we are allowed to reach? If certified, can we dive with nitrox? Is illegal cover included? Are accidents that happen during the transfers covered? Are other generic, acute physical problems included? Is liability to third parties included? We may cause damage to others. And even if we think we will not, others may think differently. And they may ask compensation for what, in their mind, it has been caused by us. What about if we have to postpone our return home? If any, what about the flight we will lose and the new one we have to pay for? And what about hospitalization, or resort accommodation? And what about our relatives? What about the repatriation of the body in case of death? What about the allowance for death, or permanent disability? What about the common exclusions? This is an incomplete list, and less important details, for example regarding the loss or damage of equipment, can be verified. If you opt for online insurance, make sure you have the necessary prerequisites to subscribe, as in many cases, if your resident status is compatible with it.
And make sure to do not fall into this misunderstanding. Sometimes, divers prefer to arrange their dives, while other times, they prefer or need to rely on diving center, dive schools, liveaboards, and so on. For these professional organizations, insurance is not a choice. It's a compulsory requirement they have to satisfy to be allowed to operate and offer their services. Their insurance covers of course their needs, which are different from the customer ones, and divers are only partially covered by the insurance of these professionals. Relying only on their insurance, we may discover when it's too late that we are not covered, as we supposed we thought. Personal insurance can be much more helpful than the general one, which is designed to cover the interest of the organizer of our dives.
There are insurance companies, specifically for divers, as well as, there are general insurance companies, that have policies, that may include also services for divers. And usually, the specialized ones, have a deeper knowledge and contacts, of the facilities located in the area they cover. While a generic one, may rely mostly on the national facilities, treating divers, as all their other typologies of customer. A specific for divers insurance company may have direct contact and knowledge of what specialized facilities are locally available, even the private one.
This video does not represent an exhaustive discussion about insurance. Before to subscribe any policy, even the ones we may mention, you have to personally make sure of details, such as costs, and so on. And if necessary, even speak to an expert insurance broker of your choice. We have no collaborative relationship with Dan, and we don't earn money by mentioning it in this video. That said, Dan, the Divers Alert Network, is probably the most widespread and famous insurance, specific for divers. If you don't want to sign up for a policy with him, you can still start with him, to set up your knowledge of the topic. As well as, you can use them to compare, with other policies. Of course, remember that the best insurance, is to dive prudently and conservatively, putting your, and your buddy's safety, on top of the list of the priorities.
Thanks for watching.